The Dershow.
Let's go back to the legal issues growing out of President Trump's desire to cut off all foreign student visas. First of all, it's not a good idea. Let's start with that. It's not a good idea to cut them all off. That means you're cutting off people who are themselves discriminated against. You would be cutting off Israelis and Jews. You'd be cutting off minorities from other countries. You'd be cutting off super patriots who really love America. So it shouldn't be a blanket cutting off of all visas for foreign students. But I do approve of the idea of vetting them very carefully and of not allowing anybody to come into this country who would be a disruptive force, even if they would have a First Amendment right to say what they're saying, if they're in this country. So this guy from Columbia University who's being detained, he has no right to come into the country. And if he lied about what he intended to do in the country, he should be deported. If he were born in this country, he'd have the right to demonstrate. And a lot of the worst people were born in this country. The guy who killed the two people in the District of Columbia was born in this country. By the way, you notice I didn't say allegedly killed. Let me be very clear about that. Allegedly is a legal issue. That is, the presumption of innocence applies in the courtroom. The presumption of innocence doesn't apply in life. It doesn't apply in the media. It doesn't apply in giving people jobs. It doesn't apply in who you marry. It applies in the courtroom. So this guy is not the alleged killer. He's the killer. Mangione is not the alleged killer. He's the killer. You might say, well, O.J. Simpson was the killer. Well, you're entitled to say that. You're entitled to that conclusion. That's a historical issue. You're entitled to say it even though a jury acquitted. We don't monitor what people say about people who are charged with crime outside the courtroom. In the courtroom, there is a presumption of innocence, and the jury has to be told about the presumption of innocence, and it only disappears once a jury has found sufficient admissible evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to convict. But don't confuse that with history. History entitles you to make your own judgment. So, yes, the guy who killed the two people in the District of Columbia, not allegedly killed. He admitted it. He said, I did it for Gaza. I did it for Palestine. So why say alleged? I'm not going to use the word alleged. I wouldn't use the word alleged against Mangione either. I mean, we know facts are facts. Who are you to believe? Me or your lying eyes? So I agree with all of that. But so I think here's my prediction. I think the Supreme Court will uphold the right of the government to decide who comes into the country and who doesn't. They will also decide that there have to be some at least minimal due process safeguards once you're in the country. But they will decide that the government has the right to determine who comes into the country. Now, will they decide that it's up to the legislature or up to the executive? Probably in the absence of any legislative action, the executive can make those decisions. The one group that can't participate in any way in these decisions is the judiciary. I don't care how unfair they think the system is. It's just none of their damn business. They can demand due process. They can demand compliance with statutes. They can demand all of those things, but they cannot simply impose a blanket stay on a presidential order limiting who comes into the country and who doesn't. That's not something that's within the authority or power of the judiciary, certainly of the lower court judiciary. Let's see what the Supreme Court decides. I'm pretty sure I know what the Supreme Court's going to decide. So you might not like what Trump's doing, but what he's doing will survive a test of constitutionality, certainly in the Supreme Court. Now, he's going to lose some in the lower district courts, particularly in front of judges who have very strong views on these matters, but he's going to win them once they get up to the United States Supreme Court. And I think he's not going to win them 6-3. I think he's going to win them by a wider margin than that, but certainly by at the very least 6-3.